That's great. So yeah, Ms. Kat, Clarice, and Kenneth, thank you for joining us for today's discussion again, and we are privileged to have you with us. So yeah, so my first question, I would be directing some of the questions to some panel members directly, and then some would be general that everyone would take turns. So this is something that I'd want all three of you to respond to. I'm interested in giving some background on what kind of education you had as a child and whether this has influenced who you are today in any way. So I would start this with Kenneth, followed by Clarice, and then Miss Kat, on what kind of education you had as a young person or as a child and how this has influenced you. I would request that we speak or address this in about 1 or 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thanks for inviting me to share my experience with an amazing team this evening. So I started my education in a rural community in Ghana. So throughout my educational journey, I have studied in public school. So I didn't have any private education. So growing up, I would say the kind of education I had was not what I believe in this time every child should have. The reason why I'm saying this is that growing up in a rural community, we found ourselves in a very difficult situation. The school, we had access. There was a school, but the problem was that we didn't have many teachers. And most of the teachers were also very old. So they didn't really understand some of the experiences of our generation. And we were also challenged with teaching and learning materials and a lot of things. So most of the times we had to depend on lesson notes and teaching notes from teachers. So in that case, due to our inability to have experience with some resources like computer, internet, like libraries and all these, most of my colleagues couldn't progress to the senior high school level. So we had an education which didn't realize the holistic development of the child. And so it was very difficult, but then I believe that we don't always have to dwell on our challenges, but then we need to take advantage of challenges as opportunities so that we can excel. So even though I wouldn't say I had a good quality education, today I have been able to go through that same system and now advocating for a better quality education for children.
Thank you very much for that, Kenneth. It's interesting to find out how not having what you desire becomes a drive for you to make sure that other people have the same. And so thanks for sharing. So I'll move to Clarice now. What kind of education did you have as a child, and how has this influenced you?
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. So my story is not different from what Kenneth shared. So in my primary school, I schooled in the same community that I'm currently working with the EduSpots. And, you know, I already had an experience with access to quality education and access to books, you know, learning materials in general, and, you know, having people to look up to or look at when you want to, you know, get inspiration or have a different story. So missing that made me rethink about, you know, other students who come after me, like what are they experiencing and why should they experience what I experience? And that's where the Badilism came in. But I can say with my high school, I actually went to a really good school, which I accessed quality education. And again, that gave me an idea of what quality education is in particular, because with my primary school, I just knew education as education, like you go to school. But when I went to my high school and, African Science Academy and Ashesi, all those from my high school till now, all those institutions I've joined, they have like made it concrete what exactly entails quality education. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much for sharing, Clarice. Yeah, it's nice to know that your educational trajectory was influenced by having access to a better senior high school than your primary school. So I'll move on to end with Kat on what kind of education you think you had and how this has influenced you today.
Thanks, Stephen. It's a good question that I don't reflect enough upon. I'd say, first of all, that I come from a very education-focused background, and I definitely am aware that that benefited me. So both my parents went to Oxford and Cambridge universities, as did my brother. And both my grandparents, I think, as well, all of my grandparents went to university, which is quite rare as well. So I think my family really value education and sort of infected me with that value of it as well. And I think that makes a big difference as well, how your kind of immediate family and community what their relationship with education is. And my mum's a professor as well, so she works in a university, and several people in my family are teachers. In terms of my own education, I went to a state primary school in an area of London that had quite a mixture of families and wealth, actually. So I think that was really a really important foundation for me, in that I was in classes with people who'd come from all across the world, including refugees and people from a really wide mix of economic backgrounds. And I think that in itself, that kind of social education it gave me was really important, as it made me just more aware of different cultures and different ways of living and thinking. And it wasn't, it was quite a standard state school on the edge of quite a poor area of London. And I loved it there, because although it was a state school, lots of state schools are really good, and my teachers put so much effort into making sure that they could cater to every child's needs. Then I was really fortunate to go to a private all-girls school for my secondary school. And although I sometimes found it difficult to be in an all-girls school, because I was more like the playing football kind of child, I was definitely given a very strong education with a strong focus on critical thinking and creative thinking, and was taught to aim high and believe. I think the school had a really strong ethos in sort of encouraging the girls there to really believe that they could do and be anything that they wanted to. And I definitely was really lucky to follow that up with going to really top university. And so I definitely feel really fortunate. And I just want to finish by saying that I think I did start to realize midway through my secondary school career that I was enormously fortunate, and that somehow I began to feel as if I was on, because of my family background and my educational position, that I was on sort of almost certain tracks towards academic success and a good job. And I realized that other people just didn't have that same starting point or opportunity. So I think that's when I started to think more critically about social justice. So kind of, difficult sometimes to be on those tracks where you've got an advantage and stay on them whilst recognizing others don't have the same privileges as you. Thanks, I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting recap. Thanks for sharing with us. So the next question I'd want to ask, and I would want to direct this to Kenneth. So our theme is Leaving No Child Behind, Community-Led Action for Closing the Educational Divide. And so these themes come from an underlying assumption that we are leaving children behind. So when we assume or we say that we are leaving children behind, I'm wondering who have left these children behind, or what have left the children behind? What do we mean by leaving children behind? To Kenneth.
Okay, before I answer this question, I would want to give a background to this Leave No Child Behind that we have been hearing in the development space. So it is our mandate as citizens, as people, to ensure that children are protected, they are educated, and they are healthy. So the Leaving No Child Behind agenda, I would say, is rooted in the 1989 Universal Declaration on the Rights of the Child, which others also call the CRC. That was introduced by the United Nations. So through this convention, like all United Nations member states agreed that we need to protect children, and children have some rights that they need to enjoy. And one of these rights is the right to education. So it is through this that and other developmental goals like the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the SDGs, that apply to every country. So all these conventions and goals establish that children need a holistic development, and we do not need to deprive children from certain opportunities like education, like good health and well-being, and also protection. So leaving no child behind is ensuring that every child, no matter their background, no matter their gender, no matter their ethnicity, no matter their disability status, enjoys holistic development. So when we say who are leaving children behind, I would say it is the system. It is a systemic issue in terms of education. How is our educational system structured in order to incorporate the needs and realities and experiences of all children, like those from a minority backgrounds, those who are racialized, those with disabilities, those who also have some hidden disabilities that teachers cannot even identify in class? Are we providing them with all the inputs that will help them to develop holistically? So I would say is the system and also the actors within the system. It is the responsibility of government to ensure that they commit to this convention that says we need to protect children, we need to safeguard them, we need to give them quality education and lifelong learning opportunities. We need to give them a head start. We need to provide them with the necessary conducive environment that will help them in their growth. So here, I would say is the system and also the actors within the system. And this also shows that all of us here have a role to play in ensuring that children are safe, in ensuring that we have inclusive policies for education, to ensuring that the voices of the underrepresented groups are heard whenever we are drafting or crafting educational initiatives and educational policies.
It's an insightful response, Kenneth, talking about the system to indicate that it's not a simple problem that there would be a one-stop all solution to, because it's been created as a result of several complex factors that has happened over the years, and that underscores the importance of getting actors in this system to act, including government and each one of us. So I want to direct my next question to both Clarice and Kat. I think all of you definitely have a strong passion for campaigning and acting for quality education. So I would want to find out from you what you think has influenced your passion and drive for working towards quality education wherever you are.
Clarice, you can start.
Okay, so wow, that's an interesting question. I have like many reasons, but I guess the root reason will be the fact that I know how it is not to experience quality education, and I also know how it is to experience quality education, and I know what quality education can do to change someone's life, and that's the main reason why I champion for it. So it's mostly rooted on my own story and my friends' stories, how we in general, you know, had to struggle to access the quality education. And it's actually funny because you might think that people are actually not interested, or someone might say, why should we care when people have access to, let's say, learning materials, or let's say internet? But when you're looking at, when they're not competing in their own communities. When you're looking at job market, in entrepreneurship, even in their own businesses, they're not competing just in their own community, they're competing in the global community. So if you're talking about why I really want these students to have access to quality education, I just want them to have that global platform where they can be seen and heard and represent themselves as equals, not because not be restricted by their background or the political status of, let's say, where they come from, or the economic status of where they come from. I'm looking forward to that day when they'll have that global platform with no restriction. That's why every time I just have to, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how your own experiences shape your drive and commitment, because you're talking from someone who has experienced the situation and know how it feels. So thanks a lot for sharing. I'll move to Kat with the same question.
So I think there are probably two parts to this for me. So the question is what kind of instilled my belief in quality, the importance of quality education, just to check.
So what has informed or influenced your drive and passion for quality education?
It's difficult sometimes to know what exactly led to this belief, but I think I have an extremely strong belief in the importance of individuals having the ability to kind of govern their own understanding of the world in different ways and have that level of autonomy over the development of their own individual kind of personhood, if you want to call it, who they are as a person and how they go about building their relationship with the world. And I think that maybe comes from myself acknowledging how having access to educational resources and books has transformed my own character. And I think my belief in really seeing the importance of this probably did come from my initial experiences of coming to Ghana and seeing students in particular who were really, really keen to learn and extend their own opportunities in different ways, but just had sort of barriers facing them at different points. So they didn't, for example, have books that they could go and learn about a subject more when they wanted to. So it kind of, to me, it seemed like it's a freedom that wasn't being given to them. And I really strongly believe that every single individual in the world should have the freedom to be able to learn in the areas they want to. And I really dream one day of a world where every single person in the world has access to education in the topics and skills that are important to them. And then I think the second part to me that this grows stronger, the belief in this as I move forward, and maybe so I'm probably influenced by seeing the impact of education upon communities. So I feel strongly that quality education, like part of that concept of quality education, is ensuring that people have an understanding of how their actions are positioned within a community and how their actions in one community can also impact people across the world. So whether that's an action to choose a certain type of energy in their house, how that can maybe affect somebody all the way over in Thailand, or how, a decision to be kind to one person in your community could somehow have a butterfly effect to transform to that person feeling supported and go and do something else somewhere else. So I believe that quality education is also about citizenship, understanding your place in your local community, global community. And that's why I believe in it, because I think without quality education, we are often led to a society where people have no concern for others and also just don't understand injustice and inequality, that they go around in their own bubble and don't understand how others are limited. So I think in summary, it's that sense of self-autonomy that I just strongly believe in myself, and I guess I love learning. And secondly, sort of understanding your place in society and how that affects our kind of collective global community.
Yeah, thank you very much. I did enjoy your response. I think I share in your point in people having that liberty and freedom to get what they want in an environment that is supportive and also reflects more on how their actions and inactions shape how things are happening in other places. So before we move the discussion to coronavirus, the pandemic, and its influence in the education sector, EduSpot is a purely volunteer-based organization, and so the change that we see in communities are being led by community leaders. I'm just interested in if any of you have any experience that you would want to share as a volunteer in at any point in your life, given that a lot of our catalysts are volunteers. So yeah, if anyone of you have any volunteer experience that you'd wish to share, you are welcome to share. And this is definitely not only limited to you volunteering with an organization, but you volunteering to lead one in any small or big way.
When you're talking about having experience as a volunteer, like what aspect of that are we talking about exactly?
Yeah, so in terms of some of the ways that you have acted voluntarily towards a cause that you are passionate about to see some particular results.
Oh, okay. So, oh, wow. So okay. Well,
yeah.
I'm having a hard time briefly, like getting things together in my head. But I would say one of the major, I'll just talk about, maybe a character trait or something that really kept me or pushed me into, volunteer aspects of life is the fact that it's actually not a trait, it's just a statement. I strongly believe in love. So with that love, I used to feel like most of the time people have a very negative perspective or view of the world or how people relate to each other. And honestly, I just wanted to experience the other side of things where you don't necessarily share the hate or the unbelief in people, but you try and see how one person loving one other person can, reflect into the whole system. So all my volunteer work, it was driven by love. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's really interesting to find out. I love it when it's coming from within. I'm wondering if any of you want to add to that as well.
Okay, I would want to add something to what I think for mine, it comes from my beliefs and it comes from my desire for change. And I love to invest in people, and I always make myself available for any opportunity that will put me in a position of supporting people, teaching others. So with my experience, I'm a trained teacher. I've worked as a teacher in the primary, junior high, and the senior high school levels. And throughout my work as a teacher, I realized that the teaching shouldn't be limited to the classroom, because as a teacher, you end up seeing so many gaps in the system. So I make myself available to help in bridging those gaps. So I think in 2014, that was my first volunteering experience. I volunteered for an NGO called Youth Alliance for Development. So that NGO was founded by a friend that I met at the university, and he's passionate about education and also about sexual reproductive health and rights. So when he started the initiative, he was working in communities, rural communities, to train and empower teachers and students about teenage pregnancy, and also sometimes about the need to take education serious. And one thing that I did was that I had the passion to teach. So in some of these communities, I volunteered my time to teach these kids, and through that, also use my own story to motivate them. And one thing about being a volunteer is that it's one of the best things that a person can do, like giving out what you have for the good of society. So through the organization, even though as a volunteer, you end up giving out, but sometimes we also don't recognize the fact that we also end up gaining experience and knowledge, and even seeing the realities of people who are in different contexts. So for me, I believe that everybody should be a volunteer. At least it's not always about going out to teach. Sometimes you can volunteer your skill in, let's say, coding, in public health, in anything, just to benefit people in the community. Sometimes too, it can be in terms of logistics, like maybe you have books, you can donate books to communities where they don't have library, or to schools. You can also give out in terms of funding to support the education of a child. All these will ensure that we don't leave any child behind. So that's a bit of me. I've done other volunteer work, but due to time, I would want to just focus on this one.
Okay, sure. So thanks a lot for sharing. I did love your point about giving, and then in the process of giving, you gain. So you're not only giving, but you're gaining something, even if it's about knowing someone, that's social capital, or gaining some new knowledge or skills in the matter of giving your time. So fortunately, I want us to move to the next question, and I'd want to address this as a starting point to Kat. I'm wondering if there's any initiative or actions that you have taken in a bid to close the gap, especially in relation to COVID-19. If you'd want to share anything like that on the past.
Yeah, so firstly, just in response to the previous question, I could have talked about that for a bit. It's an interesting question. And I think in a way, I am aware that being in a position where you can volunteer is a type of privilege, in that I know that not everybody can always afford to volunteer for long hours or periods of their life, that they might have other pressures on them, or it might be that in your life there are some periods in which you can really invest time in volunteering, and other times where you have to step back and focus on other sort of financial pressures that you might have. So I feel like I'm really lucky to be able to volunteer, although I do, yeah, I'd say I give up all my free time to volunteering, and it's something I really enjoy, but it can be quite tiring sometimes. But some of the projects during coronavirus I've been involved in have actually, just building on Kenneth's point, have completely transformed my own understanding of community action and social enterprise. So the more you get involved as a volunteer, I think the more you will pick up skills that might be relevant in your wider career in different ways, or just in your development as a person. So to cut to the question, firstly, I run a teachers group across the country in the UK that maybe one day will go international, that's about supporting teachers who are leading community service in schools. So I feel like that's quite a good way of creating change, because you're working with teachers who then impart knowledge to others. And I really believe in just the value of bringing people together who are interested in a particular field, and just giving people space to share ideas, a bit like what EduSpots is to a certain extent. So that was, during coronavirus, we immediately sort of came together to think about what we could do to support our communities as school teachers in different ways. And then I also got involved in leading quite a significant response, working together with teachers and students and parents at my school. So we did a lot of collections. This was more focused on the real physical needs that people might have had during coronavirus. So we ran weekly collections of food items, basic hygiene items, and technology devices, and distributed these to local organizations who really understood the needs in the community well, and also worked with lots of primary schools who knew which families were really struggling due to a loss of income during coronavirus. So I really wanted, it seemed really important to, again, I'm interested in how you can create systems and you sort of use the relationships and contacts I have to make people more aware of the challenges people are facing, because I feel that when people are aware of the challenges, and that's communicated well, that people are usually very willing to support depending on perhaps their own personal situations. And so we ran, I think, 22 collections over the last 5 months, collecting about 1,000 bags and boxes of items. And yeah, it was quite amazing what you could do when you come together as a community. And then we also did a lot of shopping for elderly people who weren't able to go out because they've been shielding during coronavirus. So I created a system where we had a staff volunteer team, and the elderly people would ring me, I'd take down their shopping, and then they would go out and I'd have a team who would distribute, who'd go and do the shopping, which led to having a flat full of shopping lists and people calling me all the time. And then finally, just a final thought, I don't want to speak for too long, but I've also had a real amazing opportunity to be involved in setting up an online school called Invicta Academy. So to help those students in the UK who were unable to have, I think something like 20% of kids in the UK didn't have any form of education. And I know that's a lot lower than Ghanaian students, but it's still, you know, it's a huge disadvantage gap compared to, I think, 17% nationally who were having 4 hours of lessons online every day. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for low cost or free online education in maths and English to ensure those students felt ready to return to school and that they felt confident in those subjects and that they could catch up on what they've missed. And again, it started as a small idea, and actually we managed to, as a team of people actually I only met online, who I'm really grateful to meet, that under the leadership particularly of Stephen James and Anna Firth, that they managed to create a school where 37,000 lessons were delivered over a period of 5 weeks. And they started the project having never done that before. And so I strongly believe that when you have a desire to support and when you look at the issues and analyze it, I know I'm in a position where maybe it's easier to get support, and we were fortunate to have some people financially back us. But I definitely believe, and this maybe feeds into the later discussions, that problems can be solved and that hopefully there are people out there who can support. So I'll finish there, but I've learned so much in this period and feel really fortunate to have had some positive consequences in my community of people coming together and having that sense of community spirit in spite of the really, you know, severe challenges and tragedy that this period has involved.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think I enjoyed your experience and really like your last line on the fact that there's a belief that problems can be solved, and this general belief drives people to take the action that they are taking, because if there's a problem and we don't believe it can be solved, then there's nothing to do. So thank you so much for sharing. So I'll now be accepting questions from the audience. So if you have any question, you could raise your hands and then you'll be unmuted so you can speak. So we have the first question directed to Mr. Jamra. So this is from Yvonne, and Yvonne is asking, in your opinion, what are some things individuals can do to help eradicate the systemic challenges with education in Ghana and maybe Africa as a whole? That's a really good question. So Yvonne, thanks a lot for asking. It was going to be my last question. So thanks for bringing it up. So yes, over to you, Kenneth. What do you think people can do?
Yeah, I think everyone is a stakeholder when it comes to education, because everyone has an interest in education in one way or the other. So as stakeholders of education, looking at Ghana, the mainstream education is delivered by the government. And because it is delivered by the government becomes the custodian of education. So in our in communities, we are parents, or we are students, or we are volunteers. It is our responsibility to provide some support that schools in our communities may need. It can be volunteering our time to go and speak to students if you are a student, or you are like somebody passionate about education, for instance. It can also be that parents also serving as a resource for their for their children. So at home, parents are supposed to ensure that children are or these students are learning. And one of the ways that they can do is to always motivate them by providing the right environment for them to be able to study at home. If you are a student, you may be in the university or in the high school, you also might have a younger sibling who you can guide and also teach at home and all these. But due to the nature of the problems that we have in Ghana as a whole, we have challenges with infrastructure. We have challenges with teacher professional development. We have challenges with access to education in certain parts of the country. We also have challenges with literacy and numeracy, because there is a very huge gap between students in rural areas and students in urban centers. That is why the work of EduSpots is important here, trying to bridge this gap. So we need to be part of the solution. We don't have to be the problem, but then being part of the solution would mean holding government accountable. Like, you live in a community, there are no teachers in the public school over there. What do? We need to advocate for governments. We need to put pressure on community leaders and opinion leaders to ensure that the schools there get the right input. And there are so many things that we as citizens can do. And one of the things is to always ensure that students are having the best educational experience. And by ensuring this, by engaging all the stakeholders like parents, teachers, school management, committee, NGOs that run projects in education, everyone is important. We need to work more on PPP, public-private partnership, partnering with organizations that are working in education, that have innovative solutions to some of these local problems that we have. Because some of the problems do not really require state level solution. Sometimes it's about community coming together, identifying the situations that we have there, and then working together, engaging organizations there and supporting them with the work that they are doing. Even though the challenges are huge, I think that when we are able to come together and collaborate and work as stakeholders who are very interested in the education of students, we will get there. So that's what I can say about this. Thanks for the question, Yvonne.
Yeah, thank you very much for the really insightful response, touching on a lot of other stakeholders and what they can do. And I've made points in terms of what I can personally do as well. So if Kat or Clarice wants to add a sentence or two to what has been discussed, we are happy to listen to that as we take the next question.
I'm happy to quickly add something. So I think, obviously, I don't live in Ghana at the moment, and so I don't have direct experiences currently. I've sadly not been to Ghana for a year, which is so I think that one role that EduSpots volunteers can really play in their communities in this time, looking at some of the research we've started to do in communities across the network, is to engage community members on how they value education during this time. As I think some of the, looking at we did a recent survey that actually showed some quite concerning figures concerning how many community volunteers were worried that students might start dropping out of school due to the gap in learning in this period, and we haven't done enough sort of analysis to work out if that's because they're going into jobs and they're being asked to sort of work for their parents in different ways, or if it's because they're just sort of got a reduced interest in learning, or there might be so many different factors going on. But I think EduSpots basically sort of represents in a community an interest in education, and the more that the EduSpot in different ways through different initiatives can point to the value of education for individuals and communities later in their lives in different ways that are relevant to the context, that must be a good thing. And that's one of the key sort of impact areas of EduSpots, is that I hope that it encourages that kind of community-wide focus on the value of education, because obviously not all organizations have a value of that community-wide approach to education, that they might just focus on education in the school context or in the home context. But we hope that through various different initiatives that there's ways to get all stakeholders in a community involved, going back to Kenneth's brilliant quote about everyone being a stakeholder in education. So that's my thought.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So I think at this point, if there are any other questions, we'll take them in the breakout room. We would be moving shortly to the next section, which would be a sort of workshop where we are brainstorming and learning about how to create or design an educational solution or educational project. So like I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, one of our panelists could not join us, in the person of Ms. Portia Derry, who has sent an audio, which I would attempt to play when we come back from the breakout rooms. So what we're going to do is you would be invited to join one of two breakout rooms. And in that breakout rooms, you're going to have a discussion, and the discussion is focused on creating an educational solution or creating an educational project and how to go about this. And from the beginning of the section, we learned that the goal of this is for us to brainstorm how we can design low budget solutions to closing the gap. So kindly accept an invitation to join a breakout room section when you see that. And it's going to be interactive, so get ready with your pens and papers and your juices flowing in the breakout sections, and then we would end from the breakout section. So as we get ready to get into the breakout rooms, I'm going to read some of the comments on the chat. So Richmond Amandu, thank you so much for joining and being very active. We appreciate your presence. So Richmond is saying the amount of budgets needed to be put by government is so huge, and perhaps the reason why governments appear to be dragging feet in addressing these endemic challenges, that's infrastructure, teaching materials, and human capital, that is teachers. So yeah, education and developing education does mean a huge amount of financial commitment, but I think that the current government, for example, has shown that if a government is committed to making a project work, with the free senior high school as an example, regardless of the challenges, once there's a strong political will and commitment to a course of action, money does not become the huge barrier. People would find their way. So yeah, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. So we're going to, I think it's a small number, so we'll just have one breakout rooms. So yeah, there are not a lot of, our number is small.
Okay.
If that is fine.